The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Princess Charlotte walked alongside her grandmother, Queen Camilla, their footsteps echoing softly on the ancient stone pathways. The 9-year-old princess wore a simple blue dress, her blonde hair catching the light as she listened intently to Camilla's stories about the castle's history. What neither of them knew was that this peaceful morning would soon become the center of a royal controversy that would test the very foundations of palace protocol. Sergeant Major William Thompson stood at his post near the East Terrace, his red uniform immaculate and his bearing proud after 25 years of faithful service to the crown. He had served through 3 monarchs and countless royal ceremonies, earning the respect of both his peers and the royal family themselves. Thompson had witnessed many moments of tension within palace walls, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. The trouble began when Prince William and Princess Catherine arrived at Windsor for what was supposed to be a routine family visit. Charlotte had been staying with her step-grandmother for the weekend, something that had become increasingly common as Camilla worked to establish stronger bonds with the younger generation of royals. The arrangement had been carefully coordinated by palace staff and had the full approval of both William and Catherine, who appreciated Camilla's efforts to connect with their children. However, tensions had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Recent media reports had questioned Camilla's role in the children's lives, with some commentators suggesting she was overstepping boundaries. Palace insiders whispered about disagreements over protocol and the proper way to handle the next generation's upbringing. These whispers had reached the highest levels of the royal household, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and unease. As William and Catherine's car pulled through the castle gates, Thompson noticed the unusual tension in the air. The normally warm greetings between family members seemed strained, and he observed palace staff exchanging nervous glances. Something was clearly amiss, though the nature of the problem remained unclear to those on duty. Charlotte ran to greet her parents with her characteristic enthusiasm, her face bright with excitement as she shared stories about her time with Camilla. She spoke animatedly about the private tour of the castle's portrait gallery and the special tea they had shared in the Queen's private sitting room. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the visit would proceed without incident, with the family appearing to settle into their usual comfortable dynamic. But the atmosphere shifted dramatically when a palace aide approached with urgent news. There had been a security concern raised by protection officers regarding Charlotte's movements around the castle grounds. The details were vague, but the implications were serious enough to warrant immediate attention from senior staff. This development would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge long-established palace traditions and test the loyalty of those sworn to protect the royal family. Camilla's reaction to the security briefing was swift and decisive. Drawing upon her authority as queen consort, she issued instructions that Charlotte should be immediately relocated to a more secure area of the castle, away from the potential risk. The situation required delicate handling, as any public disagreement could fuel media speculation and potentially damage the monarchy's carefully maintained image of stability and unity. Thompson watched these events unfold from his position, his trained eye picking up on the subtle signs of tension that others might miss. He had served long enough to understand that such moments could define relationships within the royal family for years to come. His own position required absolute neutrality, but his personal feelings about right and wrong began to weigh heavily on his conscience. As palace staff scrambled to implement Camilla's orders, Charlotte remained largely unaware of the adult drama swirling around her. She continued to chat happily with her parents, occasionally glancing toward Camilla with the innocent affection that had developed during their time together. The contrast between the child's joy and the adult's tension created a poignant scene that would remain etched in Thompson's memory for years to come. The security team assigned to implement the relocation arrived with professional efficiency, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from family visit to official procedure. Charlotte's confusion became evident as she realized she was being separated from her parents and grandmother without clear explanation. Her questions went unanswered as the adults around her struggled to navigate the unprecedented situation. Thompson felt his jaw tighten as he observed Charlotte's growing distress. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on following orders without question, but something about this situation troubled him deeply. The child's welfare seemed to be getting lost in the complex web of royal politics and protocol, creating a conflict between his duty as a soldier and his conscience as a human being. As the security team prepared to escort Charlotte away, Camilla approached to offer words of comfort to the confused child. Her intention appeared genuine, reflecting the bond that had developed between them during the weekend visit. However, the formality of the security presence had transformed what should have been a family interaction into something that felt more like an official procedure. William stepped forward, his own protective instincts overriding protocol considerations. As Charlotte's father, he felt compelled to question the necessity of the extreme measures being taken. His polite but firm inquiries created additional tension, as palace staff found themselves caught between competing authorities and unclear lines of command. The situation reached a critical point when Thompson realized he could no longer remain silent. His years of service had taught him to respect the chain of command, but they had also instilled in him a deep sense of duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. Watching Charlotte's confusion and distress, he felt compelled to speak, knowing that his words would likely have significant consequences for his career. Catherine moved to comfort her daughter, her maternal instincts overriding any consideration of royal protocol. The image of the 3 generations of royal women caught in this moment of uncertainty would later be described by witnesses as both touching and troubling. It represented the human cost of the complex dynamics that govern life within the royal household. Palace staff continued their preparations for Charlotte's relocation, following Camilla's orders with professional efficiency despite their personal reservations. Many had worked with the royal family for years and had developed genuine affection for the younger generation. The current situation forced them to choose between personal feelings and professional obligations, creating internal conflicts that mirrored Thompson's own struggle. The security briefing that had triggered these events remained vague in its details, leading some staff members to question whether the response was proportionate to the actual threat. However, the hierarchical nature of palace operations meant that such questions could not be openly voiced, leaving many to suppress their doubts and continue with their assigned duties. As the minutes ticked by, the initial security concerns seemed to fade in importance compared to the family drama it had unleashed. The focus shifted from protecting Charlotte from an external threat to managing the internal tensions that were threatening to tear the royal family apart. The irony was not lost on those observing the situation unfold. Thompson's internal struggle intensified as he watched Charlotte look around the room with increasing confusion and anxiety. Her trust in the adults around her was being tested in a way that seemed fundamentally wrong to the veteran soldier. His commitment to protecting the royal family suddenly seemed to require him to protect them from each other, a paradox that challenged everything he had been taught about duty and loyalty. The moment of decision approached as Thompson realized that silence was no longer an option. The words he was about to speak would either be remembered as an act of courageous principle or a breach of fundamental protocol that would end his distinguished career. Either way, he knew he could not continue to stand by and watch without acting on his conscience. The weight of 25 years of service pressed down on Thompson's shoulders as he stepped forward, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything. His voice, when it came, would carry the authority of experience and the conviction of a man who had reached the limits of what he could silently endure. The single sentence he was preparing to utter would become a defining moment in royal history, challenging assumptions about loyalty, duty, and the protection of innocence within the ancient walls of Windsor Castle. Thompson cleared his throat and stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere with quiet authority. "Your Majesty, with the greatest respect, this child belongs with her parents, not in some isolated room because of a threat that no one can properly explain. The words hung in the air like a thunderbolt, causing an immediate silence to fall over the assembled group. Every person present understood that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in the carefully orchestrated world of royal protocol. Camilla's face registered shock, then anger as she processed what had just occurred. No member of the royal guard had ever challenged her authority so directly, especially in front of family members and palace staff. Her years of navigating royal politics had taught her to maintain composure under pressure, but Thompson's unexpected intervention tested those skills to their limit. The queen consort straightened her shoulders and fixed the sergeant major with a look that could have frozen water. The immediate aftermath of Thompson's words created a ripple effect throughout the room. Palace staff exchanged glances of disbelief, unsure whether they had witnessed an act of heroic courage or career-ending insubordination. William and Catherine stood frozen, recognizing that they were witnessing a moment that would likely become part of royal folklore, regardless of how the situation ultimately resolved itself. Charlotte, still unaware of the full implications of what was happening around her, looked from one adult to another with growing confusion. Her innocent question of, "Why can't I stay with Mummy and Daddy?" seemed to echo Thompson's sentiment, though delivered with the guileless directness that only a child could manage. The simplicity of her question highlighted the complexity of the adult world that was currently determining her fate. Thompson maintained his rigid military posture, though those who knew him well could detect the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed the enormity of what he had just done. 25 years of impeccable service had been risked in a single moment of moral conviction. His career, his pension, his entire future hung in the balance. Yet his expression remained resolute as he awaited the consequences of his unprecedented action. The security team stood in awkward uncertainty, their training having never covered situations where senior Royal Guard members directly challenged royal authority. Their briefings had emphasized absolute obedience to royal commands, yet Thompson's words carried the weight of experience and moral authority that demanded consideration. The conflict between protocol and conscience was written clearly on their faces. Camilla's voice, when she finally spoke, carried the ice-cold authority of monarchy. "Sergeant Major Thompson, you will report to the duty officer immediately for disciplinary action. Your service to this family is hereby terminated, effective immediately." The formal language masked the personal hurt she felt at being challenged so publicly, but royal training required that personal feelings be subordinated to the maintenance of institutional authority. However, before Thompson could respond to his dismissal, Prince William stepped forward with quiet determination. "Actually, Your Majesty, I believe Sergeant Major Thompson raises valid concerns that deserve our consideration." His intervention transformed the situation from a simple matter of military discipline into a complex family dispute with far-reaching implications for royal relationships and future protocol. Catherine moved closer to Charlotte, her protective instincts fully engaged as she assessed the rapidly evolving situation. The Princess of Wales had always been known for her diplomatic approach to family tensions, but watching her daughter's distress had awakened a fierce maternal response that override normal diplomatic considerations. Her support for William's position was implicit, but unmistakable. The palace aide who had originally delivered the security briefing now found himself in an impossible position. His vague warnings about potential threats had triggered this crisis, yet he was unable to provide the specific details that might justify the extreme response being demanded. The weakness of the original security assessment was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone present. Thompson's allies among the palace staff watched nervously as events unfolded, knowing that his fate could influence their own future interactions with royal authority. Many had served alongside him for years and respected his integrity and judgment. His willingness to risk everything for a principle they all believed in made him a figure of both admiration and concern among his peers. The standoff continued for several long minutes, with neither side willing to back down from their positions. Camilla's authority as queen consort demanded unquestioning obedience, while William's authority as Charlotte's father and future king created competing claims to decision-making power. The constitutional implications of this clash would be discussed by royal scholars for years to come. Charlotte's growing anxiety became the focal point that eventually forced resolution of the immediate crisis. Her tears and confusion reminded all the adults present that their political maneuvering was causing real harm to an innocent child. The sight of the young princess's distress created a moment of clarity that cut through the complex web of protocol and pride. Thompson's second intervention came in a softer tone, but with equal conviction. Your Majesty, I've served this family faithfully for a quarter-century. I've never asked for anything except the privilege of protecting those I've sworn to serve. Today I ask only that you consider what's best for Princess Charlotte, not what maintains the appearance of authority. His words carried the weight of decades of loyal service and the moral authority of someone who had earned the right to speak truth to power. The emotional impact of Thompson's appeal was evident on Camilla's face as she struggled between her institutional role and her personal feelings. The genuine affection she had developed for Charlotte during their weekend together conflicted with her need to maintain royal authority. The human cost of rigid protocol enforcement was becoming impossible to ignore. William seized the moment to propose a compromise that might allow all parties to maintain dignity while prioritizing Charlotte's well-being. His suggestion that the security assessment be reviewed by additional experts provided a face-saving opportunity for everyone involved. The proposal acknowledged Camilla's concerns while addressing the fundamental questions about proportionality that Thompson had raised. Palace staff began to see a possible resolution emerging from what had seemed like an intractable conflict. The prospect of avoiding a major royal crisis that could dominate headlines for weeks provided motivation for all parties to find common ground. However, the underlying tensions about authority and decision-making within the royal family remained unresolved. The media implications of the developing situation weighed heavily on everyone's minds. News of a direct challenge to Queen Camilla's authority by a royal guard would create a sensation that could damage the monarchy's carefully maintained image. The need to prevent such a story from reaching the press added urgency to finding a resolution that all parties could accept. Charlotte's voice cut through the adult deliberations with characteristic directness. I want to stay with Mummy and Daddy and Grandmama Camilla. Why can't we all just have tea together like we planned? Her innocent suggestion highlighted the absurdity of the complex political calculations that had transformed a simple family visit into a constitutional crisis. Thompson's expression softened as he looked at Charlotte, remembering all the times he had watched her grow from a toddler into the bright, curious child she had become. His decision to risk his career for her well-being reflected not just abstract principles, but personal affection developed through years of protecting her family. The human element of his service had ultimately trumped institutional loyalty. The turning point came when Camilla knelt down to Charlotte's level and spoke directly to the confused child. "Would you like to stay with your parents while we sort out these grown-up worries?" she asked gently, her royal formality giving way to genuine concern for Charlotte's emotional state. The gesture acknowledged that family bonds transcended institutional hierarchies. Catherine's relief was visible as she moved to embrace her daughter, while William nodded gratefully to both Camilla and Thompson. The immediate crisis was defused, though the larger questions about royal authority and protocol remained to be addressed. The precedent set by Thompson's intervention would influence royal household dynamics for generations to come. As the immediate tension began to ease, palace staff started to process the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Stories of Thompson's courage would circulate through the royal household for years, inspiring debates about duty, conscience, and the proper relationship between servants and masters in a modern monarchy. His actions had challenged fundamental assumptions about obedience and authority. The security team quietly withdrew, their mission effectively canceled by the family's decision to prioritize Charlotte's emotional well-being over abstract threat assessments. Their relief at avoiding the enforcement of controversial orders was evident, though they maintained professional composure throughout the withdrawal process. Thompson remained at attention, awaiting formal clarification of his status following his unprecedented intervention. His future with the royal household remained uncertain, though William's support had clearly improved his prospects for avoiding the most severe consequences. The next few hours would determine whether his courage would be rewarded or punished by the institution he had served so faithfully. The hours following Thompson's dramatic intervention were marked by intense behind-the-scenes negotiations that would reshape relationships within the royal household for years to come. Word of the confrontation had spread quickly among palace staff, creating an atmosphere of nervous anticipation as everyone waited to learn how the unprecedented situation would be resolved. The very foundation of royal protocol had been challenged, and the response would establish important precedents for future operations. Prince William took immediate charge of damage control, recognizing that the incident could not be allowed to spiral into a public relations disaster. His first priority was ensuring that news of the confrontation did not reach the media, which would inevitably sensationalize any story involving conflict between family members. Emergency meetings were called with senior palace officials to develop strategies for managing the situation while protecting all parties involved. Queen Camilla retreated to her private study, accompanied by her most trusted advisors, to consider her options carefully. The challenge to her authority had been public and direct, making it impossible to simply ignore or dismiss. However, her genuine affection for Charlotte and her desire to maintain family harmony complicated any response that might seem purely punitive. The balance between institutional authority and family relationships required delicate handling. Thompson found himself in an unprecedented position, suspended between vindication and termination as palace officials debated his fate. His fellow guards treated him with a mixture of admiration and concern, understanding that his career hung in the balance despite the moral courage he had displayed. Many privately agreed with his actions, though few would have risked their own positions to take similar stands. Charlotte, blissfully unaware of the adult drama swirling around her, spent the afternoon with her parents exploring Windsor's gardens. The normalcy of their family time provided a stark contrast to the intense negotiations happening inside the castle walls. Her laughter and innocent questions reminded everyone involved of what was truly at stake in their deliberations. The first breakthrough came when Catherine proposed a private meeting between herself, William, and Camilla to address the underlying issues that had caused the crisis. Her diplomatic approach acknowledged Camilla's position while creating space for honest discussion about boundaries and authority regarding the children's welfare. The Princess of Wales had always excelled at finding common ground in difficult situations. Meanwhile, palace security conducted a thorough review of the morning's threat assessment that had triggered the original controversy. Their investigation revealed significant flaws in the initial evaluation, including incomplete information and excessive caution that had led to disproportionate responses. The findings vindicated Thompson's questions about the necessity of removing Charlotte from her family's presence. Thompson's military record became the subject of intense scrutiny as palace officials tried to determine appropriate consequences for his actions. His 25 years of exemplary service, including commendations for bravery and dedication, created complications for those who might have preferred simple disciplinary measures. The conflict between punishing insubordination and recognizing moral courage presented challenging questions about the nature of loyalty. The royal household's legal team was quietly consulted about the constitutional implications of the morning's events. Questions about the Queen Consort's authority over direct-line royals, the role of military personnel in family disputes, and the precedents being established required careful analysis. Their preliminary conclusions suggested that existing protocols were inadequate for addressing such complex situations. As afternoon turned to evening, the private meeting between William, Catherine, and Camilla finally took place in the Queen Consort's sitting room. The conversation was frank and sometimes emotional, with all three acknowledging that recent tensions had contributed to the day's crisis. Camilla expressed her genuine remorse for any distress caused to Charlotte, while William and Catherine recognized the pressures facing her in her relatively new role. The discussion revealed deeper issues about the integration of Camilla into the family's dynamics, particularly regarding her relationship with the younger generation of royals. Her desire to be a meaningful presence in the children's lives sometimes conflicted with William and Catherine's protective instincts. Finding the right balance required ongoing communication and mutual understanding. Thompson waited in a small office near the guard quarters, accompanied by his commanding officer, as the family deliberations continued. His fate remained uncertain, though encouraging signs emerged when Prince William's private secretary requested Thompson's complete service record and personnel file. The request suggested that dismissal was not the predetermined outcome many had feared. Palace staff began to process the day's events and their implications for future operations. The precedent of a guard member successfully challenging royal authority created both opportunities and concerns for those serving the family. Questions arose about when moral obligations might override institutional loyalty and how such situations should be handled to protect both individual conscience and royal authority. The evening brought unexpected news when King Charles, who had been informed of the day's events while traveling abroad, expressed his support for a thorough review of palace security protocols. His intervention from afar carried significant weight and suggested that Thompson's concerns about proportionality had reached the highest levels of royal awareness. The king's reputation for supporting principled stands by his staff boded well for Thompson's future. Charlotte's bedtime routine proceeded normally, though she asked her parents several times why there had been so much serious talking among the adults during the day. Her innocent questions reminded William and Catherine of their responsibility to shield her from adult conflicts while still teaching her about standing up for what's right. The balance between protection and education required careful consideration. The breakthrough in Thompson's case came when Queen Camilla herself requested a private meeting with the sergeant major. The unprecedented step of a reigning queen consort meeting privately with a staff member who had challenged her authority sent shockwaves through the palace hierarchy. Her decision reflected both personal courage and institutional wisdom about the importance of addressing conflicts directly. Their conversation, held in the queen consort's private office with only her personal secretary present as a witness, lasted nearly an hour. Camilla began by acknowledging Thompson's years of faithful service and expressing her understanding of the moral dilemma he had faced. Thompson, for his part, reiterated his respect for her position while maintaining that his primary duty was to protect those who could not protect themselves. The discussion evolved into a broader conversation about the challenges of modern monarchy and the balance between tradition and adaptation. Both participants recognized that the day's events had revealed weaknesses in existing protocols that needed to be addressed to prevent future conflicts. Their mutual respect, despite the morning's confrontation, provided a foundation for constructive dialogue. Camilla's decision regarding Thompson's future was influenced by her recognition that his actions, while challenging to her authority, had ultimately served the family's best interests. His willingness to risk his career for a principle demonstrated exactly the kind of moral courage that the royal family needed in its protectors. Dismissing such dedication would send the wrong message to other staff members. The resolution came in the form of a private apology from Camilla to Thompson for placing him in an impossible position, coupled with Thompson's acknowledgement that his challenge to her authority, while necessary, could have been handled more diplomatically. Both parties agreed that the incident had revealed important truths about their respective roles and responsibilities. Word of the Queen Consort's gracious handling of the situation spread quickly through the palace, earning her respect from staff members who had worried about her reaction to being challenged. Her willingness to acknowledge mistakes and seek common ground demonstrated the kind of leadership that would serve her well in her role. The incident ultimately strengthened rather than weakened her position within the royal household. Thompson's reinstatement to full duty came with a new assignment that recognized his unique position within the palace hierarchy. His courage in speaking truth to power had earned him a special role in reviewing security protocols and ensuring that future threat assessments were proportionate and well justified. The assignment transformed his potential disgrace into a promotion that honored his principles. The day's events concluded with a private family dinner that included Thompson as an honored guest, a gesture that spoke volumes about the royal family's values and their recognition of true service. Charlotte, delighted to see her protector join them for the meal, chattered happily about her day, while the adults exchanged meaningful glances about the lessons learned through their shared crisis. As the castle settled into its evening routine, the impact of Thompson's single sentence continued to reverberate through the royal household. His words had challenged assumptions, forced difficult conversations, and ultimately strengthened the bonds between family members and their protectors. The precedent set would influence royal operations for generations, establishing that true loyalty sometimes required the courage to speak uncomfortable truths. Royal Guard utters one sentence to Camilla after she orders Princess Charlotte removed.